I got the perfect revenge on a landlord who thought he was untouchable, and he never saw it coming. The man was one of the cruelest, nastiest people I'd ever met, a commercial landlord who treated his tenants like dirt. I was a lawyer sharing space in his building, and I'd already had a few run-ins with him. We hated each other on sight. But this story isn't about me. It's about the owner of a restaurant in the basement, a man trapped in a legal nightmare, and how he turned his landlord's own greed into the perfect weapon. I used to grab lunch at this place called The Vault. It was named for the massive, honest-to-God bank vault in the basement, a relic from a time before it was a restaurant. It was so big they could fit a few tables inside, and you could eat dinner surrounded by gleaming, ancient safe deposit boxes. One day, the owner pulled me aside. He looked completely defeated. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. I just nodded. The landlord drives everyone nuts. In the world of commercial real estate, landlords don't need a court order to evict you for being late on rent. They just change the locks. You show up for work one morning, your key doesn't fit, and your business is gone. Our landlord loved this power. He held it over everyone, a constant threat. The restaurant owner showed me a letter. The landlord was demanding a mountain of money for extra rent, charges for snow removal, parking lot repairs, common area flooring, all sorts of nonsense going back years. And at the very bottom of the letter, there it was, the threat. Pay up, or the locks get changed. Did you do something to make him hate you? I asked. This was extreme, even for this guy. He knows I'm moving the restaurant, the owner explained. I think he's trying to squeeze every last penny out of me before I go. And he's giving me grief over the vault. I was confused. He won't let you take it with you? He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons. I don't want it. But the lease says I have to remove it when I leave. And I have to restore the building to how it was before the vault was ever installed. It would cost a fortune. He says if I leave it behind, he'll sue me into the ground. I told him to send the lease up to my office. When I got back, it was waiting for me, and it was just as bad as he'd said. It was a tangled mess of renewals and assignments, with original documents dating back to just after World War II, when a bank first leased the space and installed the vault. Somehow, through decades of legal paperwork, the landlord had suckered the current restaurant owner into a lease that made him personally responsible for removing a 100-ton bank vault. My first thought was that he could just declare bankruptcy for his restaurant, let the landlord sue a shell company with no assets. But then I got to the last page. A personal guarantee clause. The owner himself was on the hook. He couldn't escape. Removing that vault and repairing the building would ruin him. The case looked hopeless. My own commercial lawyer had already told him so. But then I thought about that landlord. I thought about his threats, his arrogance, the way he treated people. And I asked my brain for a favor. And it delivered. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm finished, right?" he said, his voice flat. "You're calling to tell me there's no way out." "I can save you," I said. "But it's going to cost you." "How much?" $5,000 for my fees, and another $1,000 for an agent." "An agent? What kind of agent?" "A real estate agent," I said. "Send up a certified check, and leave the rest to me." The check was on my desk in an hour. I walked into the office of the older lawyer I shared space with, a man named Aaron. "I need a real estate agent," I told him. He looked up from his desk. "Buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." Aaron had known me for 5 years. He knew my style. A slow smile spread across his face. "You're pulling one of your stunts again, aren't you?" "Yup. But don't worry, it won't get you into any trouble." Aaron reached for his old-school Rolodex, the kind that spins, and started flipping through cards. He was a guy who knew all kinds of guys, which is probably one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred, but that's another story. "I know a guy," he said, and gave me a name and a number. The next day, I met with the agent. I laid out exactly what I needed. We agreed on his fee, I gave him the cash and some papers I drafted, and the trap was set. What happened next is the part one still can't believe. A few days later, I was back at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me come in and rushed over. His eyes were wide with panic. "He's here," he whispered. "The landlord is here." "Why?" "For lunch," he said, "and to be an asshole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He led me into the massive vault, and he closed the heavy steel door almost all the way. We had our consultation over pasta and red wine, surrounded by history. "We're making a demand on the landlord," I said, taking a bite of carbonara. A demand? What are we demanding? I pulled a document from my briefcase. We're demanding that he release all of your equipment and fixtures. The ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run the restaurant. He looked confused. The lease already says I can take all that stuff. He can't stop me. The only thing that matters is the vault, and I don't want it. I shook my head slowly, taking a sip of wine. Oh, but you do need the vault, I said. And we're demanding that he release that, too. We are insisting that he allow you to remove it within 7 business days. He stared at me, dumbfounded. You think you can beat him with reverse psychology? You think you can treat him like a 2-year-old and trick him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough, I said calmly. He's had the demand letter for a couple of days now. The owner dropped his wine glass. It shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him? He shot up, swung open the vault door, and called for a waiter to clean up the mess. Let's go see what he has to say, I said. We walked over to the landlord's table. He was a big, beefy man, sitting alone, tearing into a rack of lamb with his bare hands like an animal. My client needs an answer today, I said, standing over him. He looked up, chewing noisily. I'm the vault's lawyer. I sent you a demand. My client needs that vault for his new location, and he needs to make arrangements now. The landlord let out a short, barking laugh. He wiped his greasy hands on an already filthy napkin. Your client can forget about the bank vault, he sneered. I feigned shock, but my client's jaw dropped for real. But, you can't do that, I stammered. I'm the landlord, he boomed. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to need that in writing, I said, trying to sound defeated. My client might sue. Sue all you like, he roared. Sue, till you're blue in the face. He promised a formal, written response by the end of the day, then waved us away so he could finish his meal. Later that afternoon, the letter arrived. It was a formal, legally binding declaration from the landlord, claiming ownership of the bank vault and forbidding my client from removing it. I brought it downstairs and showed it to the restaurant owner. He read it, then read it again. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. How the hell did you do that? Trade secret, I said with a smile. The next month, the restaurant moved out. The new place was also called The Vault, and it was great, but it was missing its namesake. The original vault, all 100 tons of it, was still sitting in the basement of our building. A little while after that, Aaron collared me as I walked into the office. The landlord's looking for you, he said. Oh yeah? What about? He's furious. He said his deal fell through. Deal? He was supposed to rent the old restaurant space to a new tenant. A bank or a credit union or something. They were supposed to sign the lease today, but they never showed up. I just shrugged. What's that got to do with me? I asked Aaron, and I said the exact same thing to the landlord when he cornered me a few days later, his face purple with rage. I know you were behind this, he screamed, his jowls quivering. That offer from the agent, it was all bullshit. Just a trick to make me keep the vault, so your client could sneak out and leave that thing behind. I'm going to sue. If you're looking for a lawyer, I said calmly, I think I'm going to have to declare a conflict of interest. I'm gonna sue the restaurant, and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you, he bellowed before storming off. But he never sued. Of course he didn't. The offer he'd received from my agent was a carefully drafted, non-binding letter of intent. It was just enough to hook a greedy man who thought he saw a golden opportunity. A new tenant who wanted the space because of the vault. He thought the vault was an asset. By refusing, in writing, to let my client take it, he had released my client from the single most devastating clause in the lease. He had solved our problem for us. A year later, when I finally moved out of that building, the old restaurant space was still empty. A sad, faded, for rent sign sat in the window, a monument to a landlord who was outsmarted by his own greed. The lawyer used deception and a fake offer to trap a predatory landlord. It was a brilliant move, turning the man's own avarice into the instrument of his downfall, leaving him with a 100-ton problem he couldn't solve. But it was still a trick. So here's the question. Was this a masterful stroke of justice against a man who deserved it, or did the lawyer cross an ethical line to win? Let me know in the comments.